The Anti-Federalists' main concern was that there was no protection, no Bill of Rights to protect their rights. And in Pennsylvania, there was a group that proposed the first list of rights that they wanted included, and then that was later used by other states, and it was the dissent of the minority of Pennsylvania. Will you talk about how it related to the right to bear arms?
Sure. Pennsylvania is the first state to actually protect the right to bear arms. Virginia's Bill of Rights, which is actually precedes the Declaration of Independence by about a month, only protects the militia, doesn't protect the right to bear arms. Pennsylvania is the first state to do that. And the first state to protect the right to keep and bear arms is Massachusetts. And then they also tie it to common defense. So at the very end of the Pennsylvania Ratification Convention, some delegates from the backcountry of Pennsylvania bring forth a list of possible amendments. And we think, at least in part, they're influenced by George Mason's objections, which are circulating in manuscript. And one of the things they include is a right to bear arms. And they frame it in a very interesting and unique way, because the Pennsylvania Constitution of 1776 talks about a right of the people to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state, and also talks about the danger of standing armies. And in another part of the Constitution talks about a right to hunt. Well, in the convention, they fuse the right to hunt and the right to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state. And the question is that because they're thinking of things in very individualistic terms, or have they just, because they're in a rush and they've thrown together this list, they've cobbled together things and they haven't been very careful about it? And also, when you say bear arms in defense of themselves and the state, is that the same as saying bear arms in defense of himself and the state? Because later in the 19th century, states actually use that very individualistic language, like Connecticut does, for instance. Some people argue that bear arms in defense of themselves and the state is very individualistic. Other people argue, no, if you actually understand the history of Pennsylvania, particularly that it's not had a militia during most of the colonial period because Quakers are pacifists, and that you have both a necessity to bear arms for the state, but also for your local community against Indian attack, for instance, where the state of Pennsylvania is not being attacked, Carlisle's being attacked, or Pittsburgh's being attacked, or or just a group of families on the frontier being attacked. So there's this sense that the meaning of the Pennsylvania Constitution could be interpreted in several different ways. By 1790, they've rewritten actually their provision on arms bearing, and they've separated the attack on standing armies from the right to bear arms, which is interesting. So I think if you wanted to argue that there was the beginnings of a more individualistic conception, that 1790 Constitution is actually a better example than the 1776 Constitution. But I think there's still some disagreement even from 1790. I don't think it's really until the 19th century that you get unambiguous, strong individualistic language, like provisions like in Alabama, for instance, which say each citizen has a right to bear arms in defense of himself and the state. I don't think there's any ambiguity there. So the question is, why did the language change? In my book, what I argue is the fact that the language evolves in that individualistic direction suggests that the 18th century language was not generally understood to be as individualistic. So, my argument is that our understanding of the right to bear arms actually changes over the course of American history.